Hello, leaders. Welcome back. Listen, I'm here today to talk to you about how do you shift from I hate my job as a leader to I love my job as a leader. And listen, I know that this is how you're feeling because I felt this way too very early in my leadership career before I actually developed all of those leadership competencies and skills to give me confidence so that I could do the work that I was meant to do, which was lead and motivate and inspire people to greatness. So, I'm going to tell you why it's so important for leaders to love what they do. Number one, in healthcare, if you're a leader, that means you take care of people who turn around and take care of people. So, the way you engage with them is so incredibly important. It's important because if they have an amazing experience, if they have a leader who loves what they do, instead of looking at it with drudgery and regret, then they're going to turn around and do those same things. Why? Because you're role modeling those behaviors for your team members. So I'm going to ask you to really look inward now, and I want you to look back. And if we were just to circle back a little bit, I would say to you, what drew you in to leadership? That's it. What drew you in? And I want you to answer that question because it's so important for you to understand what brought you here so that you can understand what you can do to make it better for yourself. So for me, I will tell you what drew me into leadership was I always had this desire to want to be that type of leader who was going to be able to make a difference. You've heard me say it over and over again. Even from the time I entered into the workforce, I had tremendous leaders. I had such great mentors that were able to actually teach and guide and inspire me to want to be that type of a leader. But I've also had my fair share of leaders who did not have those abilities. So I understand what it's like to have somebody that's leading you, that's not inspiring you, that's not communicating to you in a way that gets you excited or even looking at the work that you're doing with this sense of connecting passion to purpose. I know what that's like. But for me, I understand just how important this journey is. So I'm going to ask you to ask yourself while you're looking inward and thinking, what drew me here? And if the answer for you is somebody said you were a great fill in the blank, you would make a great supervisor and or leader, and you weren't inclined to do this yourself, well, maybe that's a clue for you. But if somebody said to you and you answered that question, or somebody had you look inward and you decided, I'm doing this because I want to be the best version, then that's also going to give you a clue. It's going to give you an idea of whether or not that picture in your mind of what drew you in, is that still possible? And listen, I've coached a lot of people in my career, and I'm the first person to be able to say there is nothing wrong with looking back and saying what drew me in, right? And if the answer is not that you had this passion and you had this desire to do it, but you just kind of thought it was the natural next thing to do, but you really are not enjoying it and not loving it and not enjoying interacting and growing and driving and managing performance, then it's okay to say maybe this isn't the job for me. Because I just believe that when it comes to leadership, it is so incredibly important that every single leader really look at it from that place and that lens that you are there to inspire, grow, and motivate and bring out the best of your team members. And to do that, you've got to learn how to do it. So if that is something you're still interested in doing, then let's get started, because it's time to self-reflect. It's time to look inward. It's really time to make change. Because I know if you're like me, there are so many times in my career, especially in that early career in leadership, where boy, oh boy, do I wish I had a time machine and I could travel back in time and handle and manage things differently. I mean, that's what's remarkable in life when we're here in life school, is of course things look different when we're past it. And we can absolutely look back and say, how would I have handled or done or managed that situation differently? That's 100% normal. And that is a normal feeling that you are going to have. And the best leaders are the ones that actually learn from their experiences and understand that the most important piece of this is gaining consistency in your approach. And what do I mean by that? I mean, we're doing it in every single situation with every single unique member of our team in every single incredibly difficult and stressful period. So I'm going to ask you really to look inward and to look and see, when I say as a leader, a lot of this has to do with you having this ability to have confidence in your capabilities. And that confidence is so strong that it exudes out of you. People can see that you're confident, and you can have both, the competencies to do the role, and it's very natural. And again, we know this to be true from the leadership, from the research, that leadership is learned through practice. So I want you to look inward and look at those things that might make leadership a little bit shaky for you, where you're feeling like, yep, those things make me want to really hate my job. And again, I'm going to remind you that when it comes to leadership and your own personal and professional development, it is always going to be about you getting better and getting mastery. And you're going to do that through practice and repetition. And there are going to be some things that you are going to be so great at. It's going to be like natural, like breathing, and you're not even going to have to put much effort into it. And there's going to be other things that are going to be quite challenging and difficult for you. And you're really going to have to learn the skills on how to do that. So what could some of those practices be? Maybe you're a little shaky around your hiring practices. Maybe you're bringing people into your healthcare organization and you're not doing a really good job in your interviewing, in your questioning to those candidates. I've seen people make tons of mistakes. Listen, I've had interviews where people have hardly asked me one or two questions, which is always a red flag. I mean, that is your opportunity to understand from that individual, how do they manage really difficult and challenging situations? And what have they done in the past? And what works best for them? Or maybe you're a little bit shaky on the fact that you're not gaining consistency in role modeling all of the really good, strong leadership behaviors that your team need to see in you, right? Positivity, optimism, showing, resiliency despite adversity, really being able to push through those difficult times with grit and determination. And that's where you need to get better at. Or maybe it's just that you're really struggling with your ability to have presence in the moment, to slow down your pace enough to really be with a person, to really engage in a conversation with that person, to really open up and create that safe psychological space for them to share and for you to encourage and inspire. Or maybe it's just that some of your tools in your toolkit, and when I say that, I mean your leadership skills and competencies, are a bit on the rusty side and they could use some sharpening. And again, these are all so critically important because as a leader, you need to know where to place your emphasis and focus. It's like in healthcare, right? I mean, we diagnose people with conditions so that we know how to provide a plan of care to be able to heal them and treat those conditions. And we're again treating the mind, the body, and the spirit. It's no different with leadership. If you're not diagnosing those areas where you're having trouble gaining consistency and getting mastery in, then you run the risk that you are just going about work and you're really not even tuned in to like how those types of things are having an impact on your team. So you will always hear me encourage you. When it comes to leadership, it's really just as simple as creating a plan that, again, is very focused on one or two things that you can do differently to gain consistency. You heard me right. It's not about boiling the ocean and trying to do everything. It's about learning to do it from a place of simplicity. It's like me. Listen, I'm trying to work on self-care. I would love to do all those things that I used to do pre-COVID that gave me a lot of joy. It's not reasonable. It's not going to cause sustainability. So what do? I choose one and two things each day that is going to get me to a place where I can gain consistency and I can get confidence in myself and I can actually push myself through. So if we go back to those examples we talked about in the beginning, right? What would a plan look like if maybe you were shaky and a little rocky with the whole hiring and interview process and bringing people into your organization and weeding out those people that really are not a good fit for where you're trying to take your team? Well, maybe that one or two things are just maybe learning a couple good questions that you can engage and thread into that conversation that are meant to give you an idea of how people handle situations in stress. And what have they learned? Or tell me a story about a time in your past where you made a mistake. And what did you do when that mistake was made? And how did you learn from that? Right? That one question is going to tell you a whole lot about that person and if they were willing to actually learn from that mistake and use it to become better. If we take the example that I talked about, which is role modeling, right? Maybe you're not role modeling some of those really good leadership core competencies that are needed, like optimism and positivity and determination and grit. So maybe one or two things that you might do differently is you make a commitment that you are going to try to focus the conversation on something that's positive. Praise and point out over and over again the things that people are doing well instead of always explaining all of the reasons why people don't want to work, don't want to be engaged. Heaven forbid it has anything to do with us as leaders. It has everything to do with it. And the way you handle those situations, the way you help redirect people is so incredibly important. So break out those skills and pick that one or two things that you can do differently. Maybe you're coming in and you're unable to shake off what happened to you the day before. So then no surprise, everybody else can't do the same. So we have to look inward because as human beings, our natural tendency is always to look outward, is to always point out everything else that's going wrong or all the reasons why something's not working. An exemplary leader is somebody that before they look outward, they look inward. And they say, how can I handle that situation differently? What could I have done to manage that situation with ease, with confidence, and to just bring that person back to the sense of the work that they do matters. Yes, it's healthcare. It's always going to be full of challenges. But when you can remind your team members, because you form that really strong relationship, that it's okay. I'm here to remind you that we are going to have the ups and the downs, but you know what we have that's different than everywhere else? We have a great team of people that we will never let one another down. We're going to work hard and we're going to do it every single day until we get to a state where we all are working in unison. And yes, one day John's going to have a bad day, and one day Susan's going to have another bad day. And that's okay too. It happens. But what we do is we rise up and we continue to work together as a team. So, what happens if you're struggling with presence? What's the one or the two things that you might do differently? Well, maybe it's just that you come in a little bit earlier to round and to connect with your team members. Maybe that's what you do. Or maybe it's just that instead of you rushing by that or looking at that disruption as something that's getting in the way of what you have to do, instead you switch and change your mind and you say, I'm not going to look at that as a disruption anymore. If somebody needs me, I'm going to put my pencils down, I'm going to put everything down, and I'm going to give that person my full attention. See, leadership is all about consistency. But again, don't try to do everything. Just start by doing one or two things over and over again until it becomes natural. And then once that becomes like breathing and you don't have to worry about it anymore and you're just doing it automatically, then you can add in another one or two things. It really is just that simple. And remember, as leaders, some of the most important work we have to always remember is that we're role models. Not only are we role models of what we know is important, which are those essential principles of healthcare workers that work in a professional setting, right? Care, compassion, patience, kindness, even love, consideration. But it's also about getting people excited and motivated to do the work that they do and to come back the next day. But you will always hear me say that there are some important characteristics for leaders that you better have it on your radar, and you better be communicating them when you're building your team to try to get them to where you're trying to take them. Number one is your ability as a leader to vision cast. And what do I mean by that? You have to have a vision. Where are you taking your team? What is it you want to accomplish with this group of people? And how are you going to articulate that in a very simple language to where people actually know and understand, I can get on board with that, right? So a perfect example might be like if you're struggling, right, with people, lots of call outs, because that happens. We work in the field of healthcare, right? Typically, most healthcare workers don't do a good job of self-care, which is why we need to heal our hearts every day and focus on our mind, body, and spirit, and make sure we're giving ourselves that time to get inside of ourselves, to heal ourselves and come back the next day. But it's going to take exemplary leaders to create the path that are going to be able to create the vision and to direct people of where to go. So maybe your vision is, hey, I'm trying to build a team here where we all work in unison. We support one another, and we know in the tough times when things happen and we run short, that something called out or we had an emergency or something happens, we all know we're going to come together. And that starts with me making sure I'm here with you alongside those difficult moments. And that is 100% possible. So go back and think about the vision that you want for your team and make sure you're casting that vision, right? There are some other characteristics that are equally as important. Your ability as a leader to inspire and motivate people. I mean, that's a leader's job. If you've ever worked for a leader that doesn't have this natural ability, you know how difficult it can be. When someone's complaining and they're just looking at their typical day from that lens of drudgery and all of the things that are going wrong, no surprise to you that everybody else is looking at things the same way. So we need more leaders to step up to the plate, to find their own internal inspiration, and to use it to motivate and drive people forward. And that goes into my third essential principle, which again is your ability as a leader to show determination and grit. Listen, you know this in healthcare. The work we do is so incredibly full of challenges, and some days it's so hard. Even when you have people that have achieved mastery and with their skills, and they're not working from a place of just learning. They've really got to that state of mastery. There's lots that happen. And so it's going to constantly be testing you. It's going to be testing your team. And again, the natural inclination is going to be for you to look outward, but I want you to train your mind to always look inward. Look for those clues of what's happening in your environment, what's happening with your team. Be honest with yourself. Be honest with your team members. Be fully transparent and know that this is so important to examine this, because when we think about leadership, the truth is you don't know what's happening to your team members outside of work. There's a lot of things that happen outside of work. And I know for me, I went from a place of being that leader that was always inspiring, always motivating. And listen, after serving during COVID, when I look back at my journal entries, I could see how some of that just chipped away. And I felt like I was being robbed of who I was at my core, right? And that was my journey, was to really look inward and say, well, wait a minute, yes, this happened and it happened for a reason. And I was thankful that I had the skills and the competencies to be able to serve as a nurse and to be able to provide care. And I did what I needed to do in that moment of time. But that moment doesn't define me, nor is it going to rob me of what I know to be true, which is in healthcare, we need people to find their joy and happiness again. And that starts with leaders really modeling the way. So I'm going to ask you to do what I love to ask people to do all the time, which is think about somebody that you know who is the happiest person you know. That's right. Who is the happiest person that you know? And I'm asking you that question because I want you to think about that person, sort of take that step back and step up and look at it at a higher level. Do you know why that person is so happy? Do you know what that person does that makes them happy, even in the difficult times? And when I think of one of the happiest people I know, it's a dear friend of mine that I happen to live very closely to, and her name is Heather. And boy, was she amazing. She always looked at the world from this happiness lens, and things were absolutely from a place of ease. And when I've looked at her, the way she managed, it was me wanting to be around people like that made me even recognize how important happiness is. So if you can't find somebody in your sphere of influence that is happy, generally happy, then maybe it's time to again, look inward and look at that from that lens of how can I make sure I'm at least finding moments where I can allow myself to be happy. And we know from the research in neuroscience that this is 100% possible when we sit in those spaces of joy and happiness for longer periods of time. We can create new neural pathways. So those neural pathways are going to be designed like those little off ramps that are going to make us want to look at the world in a more happier lens. And we also have to be honest with ourselves. There are things that are robbing us from our own happiness. Look inward. Again, don't look outward. I've seen a million times and I've done it myself. I'm super guilty, right? If I'm not happy, it's no one's fault but my own, right? It's not who I'm, it's not my spouse, not my children, it's not work, it's me. I have to look and examine and take that time out to look and say, what can I do differently that's going to give me that happiness? And even if it's 10 or 15 minutes every day, sitting in silence and learning how to slow my pace down so that I can hear what's happening around me and just be in a different state, that's a way to shift your energy. And I will tell you, it's no different. I mean, here we are, we're coming up to the end of summer and then we're moving into fall, right? We don't have to worry that the seasons aren't going to change. Every season changes pretty quickly. The leaves are going to start dropping, and pretty quickly we're going to start seeing that winter's going to come. We don't wonder, boy, I hope that fall comes, and I hope that winter comes, and I hope that spring comes. No, there are different seasons for a reason. We kind of move through those. And it's just like life. There are going to be seasons where you're maybe not going to be at your best as a leader. Maybe there are things happening in your world that are causing you not to be happy. Like for me, like I said, during those periods of COVID, it really rocked my world. It made me have to look really deeply inward to understand and examine what was the cause of all of that sadness, and finding a way to release those emotions and letting those things go so that I can move forward and step forward into what I was supposed to be doing when I was here in life school. And that was teaching and educating people and making sure that they were connecting the work that they do and recognizing that no matter what happens in healthcare, what they do is so incredibly important. So remember, there's lots of stressors that come into play for both you and your team members, right? People could be dealing with issues with their partners. People could be dealing with issues with their children. People could be dealing with issues with parents, with finances. There's like a million things, right? And so I don't need to tell you that when we deal with stressful situation, that stuff oozes out into the way we lead, for sure. And so for some of you, it's really going to be getting into that self-reflection and saying, all right, what are those things that I might be bringing into the workplace every day, those stressors, and how can I release some of that so that when my team are stressed, I'm in a better position to respond instead of react. I'm in a better position to be able to understand that stress that they're going through, if I just take that step back and step up and look at it from a different lens, right? And instead, I manage that in a more positive way with intention, with really giving some thought behind those words, with really encouraging people to try to look at it differently, with maybe just listening and validating how a person feels and sitting in their space, that trusted space, but not trying to solve it necessarily for them, but just trying to be able to understand how you can best support that person. And what's something that you can do just to make them feel like they're going to want to come back and do it again tomorrow, right? That comes from really strong and exemplary leadership. Because even in those difficult times, when you have a leader that's able to articulate and use those words to be able to say to somebody, I'm really sorry you had a really difficult day. But you know what? I'm so glad I was here to be here with you today. And I hope you can see that my support, that I was really trying to help you, and that, you know what? Tomorrow's a new day. And don't ever forget that the work you do is so important, because you're taking this great superpower that you have, that you were destined to use and to learn how to use it in mastery. And you're making a difference in someone's life by healing them and by making them feel better. And listen, I always want you to work from this place of just understanding that with leadership, it really is just understanding that the more we can do by taking that step back and that step up, by really building in those natural pauses and not feeling so rushed to react, but instead we respond, and we respond from a way where sometimes it's just that we create a little bit of extra space and we ask questions and we ask somebody for permission. How can we help you get through this difficult time? And sometimes it's even just noticing that someone's stressed, right? I want to check in with you to make sure you're okay. As I was walking by, it just seemed like right now I could see that you were stressed. Is there anything I can do to help? 100% when you start really looking outward and you start directing things through your teams and you start seeing that as a result, they see that in you. Boy, will they see that in you. They will see that a leader took time out of their day to check in and to provide a level of support that they've never felt from somebody else. And I guarantee you, that is going to make your shoulders sit back and you're going to be sitting up a little taller and you're going to feel really good about what you do, because you're going to realize very quickly that you're going to start loving what you do, because you get a chance every single day to make somebody's life better and to make them know that the work that they're doing has meaning and purpose, and that you're there to support them. And that no matter what, as a team, we're going to get through these tough times together, and we are going to get to a place where we're all going to be better as a result. And for that, you're going to feel extraordinary. So keep doing what you're doing. Don't be discouraged. Listen, leadership is a journey, but it is such an incredible journey when you're willing to be open and to explore things in yourself and to learn how to connect with the people that you lead in a different way. And you're going to learn that you're going to get better at it each and every day. I hope you took something from this podcast, and I hope you listen in on a future podcast. And again, thank you for everything you do every day. Goodbye, everyone.